Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast.
We see the syphilitic shrinking obelisk, the white man's wilting dick. We see through dangling jowls of seedy game show trolls the smiling lie of the televised hive. The witches are watching with their thousand eyes. Witches are watching with their thousand eyes. We smell rotten teeth that speak beyond belief. A stick inside their skull would bring relief.
Welcome to the first episode of the second season of the Fun Ideas Podcast, hosted by Mark Arnold. However, I am not Mark Arnold. I am Mort Todd, and I've taken over the show for this episode. And in case you don't know me, I think I was a guest on the very first episode of the first season. Former editor of Cracked Magazine and Monsters Attacks, and worked as an editor at Marvel, and among other things, animate and make short films and blah, blah, blah. But we are brought to you by the fine people at Lee's Comics.
Hi, I'm George Takei. You know me as Helmsman Sulu on Star Trek. When I'm not busy going Warp Factor 8, I like to beam down to Lee's Comics in Mountain View and spend a lazy afternoon reading comics classics from Marvel to DC, from Dark Horse to Fantagraphics, and everything in between. So please, spend some time here at Lee's Comics and spend your hard-earned cash.
The Fun Ideas Podcast is made possible by listeners like you and from Lee's Comics of California, selling you what your mother threw out since 1982, online at leescomics.com.
And now I'd like to introduce the very special guest for this episode, a famous author. You know him, you love him. It's Mark Arnold.
Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you. Oh, jeez. Embarrassing to have it flipped around.
Yeah, I know. You're not in the interviewer chair now, buddy. But, most people should know that Mark is the author of such excellent books as The Best of the Harveyville Fun Times, The Story of Underdog Tuxedo and the Rest, which is created and produced by Total Television Productions.
I like that name, Underdog Tuxedo.
Right. And a great book on the history of Walt Disney Productions, Frozen in Ice, among, a bunch of other great books about comics and comics history. And perhaps my favorite, If You're Cracked, You're Happy, Cracked Magazine Story, Part 1 and Part 2. Of which I'm waiting until they make a movie of that, because I want to see who they cast me as in that one.
It'd make a great movie.
And also, Mark and I are also currently working on a project that we'll tell you about in due time. So welcome to your own show, Mark.
Yay! So I am at your beck and call. I will answer all. Maybe.
Right. You'd be like the Magic 8 Ball. It's like, ask later.
Yes. I don't, or like I said, I don't remember. I can't recall. I don't remember anything at all.
Well, let me first ask you, what inspired a young lad in Saratoga, California, to become interested in pop culture and become an official pop culture historian such as yourself?
Well, I mean, I would be known as what they now classified as a geek, I suppose. I never liked that term. It was always nerd or fool or idiot or something, or outcast or social pariah or whatever. But when I was a kid, there's always comic books around the house. and the TV was always on, and we'd go to movies. So I was just immersed in just all forms of media that existed at that time, which we're talking late 60s, early 70s. So it's like, you have 3 networks and maybe a public television, a couple independents, and for TV, I was born right at the time TV transitioned into color, so I don't remember too much black and white stuff except for, because we always had a color set, except for like reruns of I Love Lucy and stuff like that. And what else? Movies, you had to go see something in the movie if you wanted to see it. If you didn't, you'd wait for the reissue, and there was no home video.
On cable, on the internet or anything.
Yeah, and then if you watched it on TV, 9 times out of 10, it was cut. And it wasn't because it was cut because it was dirty. It was just cut for time. They just said, this movie will fit in this slot. We'll just take out these 5 scenes. They won't miss it until you see it next time. You go, hey, I don't remember this scene, and then you find out that they recut it a different way the next time you saw it.
There's also the contrary when they did like Superman on TV and added scenes.
Yeah, well, that was later. That was when they made special events, and Godfather, they did that and stuff like that. But I remember the days, they used to have this movie show in San Francisco called the 3:30 Movie, and it was a 90-minute time slot, but that was with commercials, so you knew most movies, are 90 minutes or longer, so you knew they cut a bunch of shit out, so it's like,
Definitely, they had one in New York, I think it was at 4 o'clock, and sometimes they would cut it into 2 days.
Yeah.
To make it fit. Because, I remember, they'd have, the Batman movie, and it would always be cut when he's running on the wharf with his bomb,
Now, it's kind of funny. One movie I thought was improved by the cut, and then I saw it later uncut, and I go, wow, this is a shitty movie, was the original Casino Royale with Peter Sellers, Woody Allen, and Orson Welles, and all that stuff, and David Niven. And I used to love that movie. And then I saw the full uncut version. I go, wow, this is dreadfully dull. Where's that cut version I remember as a kid? But
it's better in small doses.
Exactly.
But it did have a great soundtrack.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
A really good background.
And that's another thing. My mom, and my dad to a certain extent, but they were always into music and stuff like that, and they had a wide variety of tastes. My parents are kind of square in a certain respect. Sorry, Dad, but my mom's passed away. I can say anything I want. No, but at the same time, they were always open to new sounds. So it's like, they would have something as square as maybe like the Funny Girl soundtrack or something like that. And then they'd have like when my dad got out of work in 1971, my mom bought my dad the Shaft soundtrack.
Right on.
And they had other things like Ike and Tina Turner's album that had called Working Together that had their version of Proud Mary, which I thought was the original version. I didn't know Creedence did that years ago.
Yeah, no, me too. I remember hearing it on the radio first from Ike and Tina. Yeah.
So, I have a wide variety of interests in music and TV and movies.
So were your parents very enabling of your interest in funny books and other bizarre stuff like that?
Yes, which is fortunate. My mom never threw anything away. In fact, my mom was the opposite. She was a pack rat. I tended to get rid of things because I just said, I'm getting too much stuff, but I still have quite a few things that I've kept as a child. Including all my cracked magazines and all that shit. But anyway.
Well, it sounded like you had a pretty rounded reading material, different genres, not specifically superheroes, based on the books you put out with, covering Harvey comics and, and stuff like that. So you weren't just limited to superheroes like most people are nowadays.
Yeah, my interest in superheroes, it's kind of bizarre because I liked the Batman TV series with Adam West, and I liked, what was on Saturday morning, even things like Super Friends with Wendy Marvin and Wonder Dog, and anything with superheroes I'd watch. But I always had it kind of in my head that superheroes should be fun, so it's like when superheroes started getting dark and gritty, and I hate to say also in a different negative way, more soap opera-ish, I started losing interest, because it's like, there was a time when I'd read X-Men and things like that in like the mid-'80s, let's say, and they'd say, to be continued, and you'd have to buy 30 other titles just to find out what's happening in the storyline. And it's like, I just want to buy this one title, not every other X-Men book and Dazzler and Marvel Team Up and Marvel 2-in-1 and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, so...
Sure.
That's
in the 60s, you could get a copy of Superman, and it would have 3 complete short stories in it.
Right.
And, nowadays, it's you got, not only do you have to buy crossover issues, but the continuity. It's like, if you don't know like the Marvel Bible, there's no way to follow anything going on in it.
Right. And also, I don't know, it's like, you always talk about people, quote unquote, growing up. So I kind of went backwards on my comic book reading. People usually, they start off with Harvey, with Casper and Richie Rich, and then they graduate to like Archie, and then they graduate to the superheroes. I was kind of the opposite. I went for the superheroes, and then graduated to Archie, and then I ended up with Harvey. It's like, I always like funny things. That's really the key. And, like, I would prefer, like, in the 70s, like Shazam as a title more than the regular Superman title, because it was a little bit dry and straight. I love the artwork. I like Kurt Swan and stuff like that, but, it's just like, get some funny in here. And so I'd buy things like Howard the Duck, which is now laughable, but at the time it was really popular. And, of course, I bought all the humor magazines, Mad, Crack, Crazy, whatever. And, didn't buy too many Archies and Harveys, strangely enough. I did on occasion, because, but I didn't think they were that funny, so, it wasn't until later that I got into buying those, like, heavy duty, like, every issue, and gotta have it, and stuff like that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and almost like you're saying, the older the better, because,
yeah.
It seems like with Archie and Harveys and stuff that, they got cornier as they got older, but the earlier stuff have some raw fun to them.
Right. And then there's this big quest at that point to get all the back issues, which I did succeed with the Harvey stuff. There's very few I need. Archie I kind of gave up on, and my collection is what it is. But it's just my own interest level. It's probably because of the books I've done. Certain ones I go, oh, I got to get them all. Like, I think even when I did the Crack book, I didn't have all the Crack magazines yet, for example. I was missing a few, and now I have them all, so there you go.
Did you get all the Fast Willie Jacksons?
I do have all the Fast Willie Jacksons. Excuse me, you're getting me coughing.
I just buy any comic, and I even, got all the Archie Christian comics, and, no matter what it was. Just get any kind of comics. So how did you segue from a nerdy little geek into a professional? Did you go to school for that?
No. I guess I did for a certain part of it, but let's stick with the comic book stuff. In those wonderful pre-internet days, and I don't know, I'm sure you did stuff like this. It seems like everybody, comic book nerd, has done this. You make lists of things. You make lists of issues you want. You make lists with issues with artists or writers you like, or you make lists of, all the Marvel titles or all the Harvey titles or whatever. And so I used to make lists of things back in the old days before, computers, and, things like Wikipedia that has it all listed out for you or whatever, and, so all this statistical stuff I just kind of did. I didn't think anybody else in the world did this. It turns out a lot of people did this, but, when you're in your own world and before the internet, you think you're the only person in the world that's interested in this. And, and it's partially correct because, once I did get into, like, Harvey comics where I was publishing my fanzine and stuff like that, the people were all over the country. They weren't like... anywhere near me. So and like Cracked, I thought I was the only person who bought Cracked, and and I always tell the story.
A few others did.
And I always tell the story is like when the publisher at Bear Manor said, "Why don't you do a book about Cracked?" Because I was bragging that I had all the issues, even though I was still missing a few, but I had all the regular issues. And he says, "Why don't you do a book on Cracked?"
His idea to do the book.
It was his idea. I didn't want to do it because, I've told this story before, maybe not here, but it's like he says, well, after the Underdog Total Television book, he says, "Well, what do you want to do next?" And I go, "I don't know." And he goes, "Well, how about a history of Cracked magazine?" And I really said, "Does anyone really care?"
Well, I guess they did, because that book has sold 1 million copies.
Yeah, right. No, but it actually is one of my better sellers, I will admit. Strangely enough, the worst sellers of my books are the Disney one and the Beatles one. I don't know why.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Two of the most popular cultural phenomenons in media.
Yeah, I know. It's weird. And it's part of the reason I kind of stick by kind of quirky stuff as opposed to the mainstream stuff, because it sells. Like, people have asked me a zillion times, it's like, "Why don't you write a book on the history of Mad?" Because there's like 4 or 5 really good books. Yeah, there's, you get the Frank Jacobs one, William Gaines, and then you get the Dick DeBartolo one, and then there's another one about the history of Mad, and there's another one about Kurtzman, and it's like,
Right.
They did it.
Definitely got your niche.
Yeah, and they did it, and they did it as well as I would. I mean, if there's a really awful Mad book, I'd certainly write one, but I don't want to compete
your first book was The Best of the Harveyville Fun Times.
Yeah.
Was that a collection from a newsletter you were doing?
Yeah, I was published. Well, I've said this other places too. I don't know if I said it here, but it's always like what got me into fandom beyond just doing my own little lists and everything is, well, I'd buy other fanzines because, you couldn't find information on an internet. You had to look in an encyclopedia or something, and it was always outdated or incomplete or not even there. And I was subscribing to this fanzine called the Frostbite Falls Far-Flung Flyer. It was about Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Like it might be a Jay Ward.
Yes, it was, and it was about Rocky and Bullwinkle and everything, and George of the Jungle and all the other stuff they did. And
was Ward involved with that?
No, I think they interviewed him or everybody else over the years. But
he used to have a store on Sunset Boulevard.
This was like me publishing the Harvey thing. I wasn't working for Harvey, but. I contacted the guy. His name is Charles Ulrich. I don't even know if he's around anymore. But and I said, "Do you make any money off of this?" And he goes, "No, not really, but enough, to publish it." And I go, "Okay." I go, "How many subscribers do you have?" And I was just asking him different things, and he said, "Yeah, a couple hundred, And I go, "Where do you promote it?" And he goes, "Like in the Comic Book Price Guide, and a few other places." And and it's like it's not my job. I just do it on the side. And I go, And so the wheels started.
Struck a chord with you.
Well, it started turning because in high school I was into journalism. I worked on the school newspaper and the yearbook and all that stuff, and I hadn't worked in the newspapers in the real world yet. So. And the quote that I've always said about myself is like, and I was having difficulties getting published because I'd submit articles to different magazines and they'd say, "Oh, thanks, but no thanks," and we'll call you, don't call us, blah blah blah. And so I said, well, I'll be like the little red hen. I will publish myself. And once I found that out, I said, "Oh, this is pretty neat. I can write whatever I want, and if nobody likes it, well, it doesn't matter because I'm the publisher, I'm the editor, and and whatever." But
did it start out as a photocopy thing, or did you actually go to a printer and stuff?
The first ones were typed on a typewriter, and they were photocopied on my Works Xerox machine. Whoops. And I can say it now because it's 30-something years later. I was working at KBHK-TV at the time, and when it was after hours, I would photocopy copies, but I only had like 20.
That makes it cost effective.
Yeah. And I only had like 20 subscribers then or something like that, so it's no big deal. But as it grew, and I got like 150, 200, 250, it's like, oh crap, I need, I can't do this at work. And so I did get an outside printer, and I would still do things on layout boards. It still wasn't high-techy enough with computers to do, PageMaker and all that stuff. So I was still cutting and pasting, and I basically cut and paste almost to the end because it was just easier to do it that way. But I did get better where I was like scanning photos and doing things on laying it out on the computer. I just didn't use the professional layout programs like I probably should have, but
it worked.
I did at the end, and in the end it was color, but that's I published for 21 years, so it's like that's a long time.
Great.
So.
And did you self-publish the collection, or who put that?
Yeah, that was another thing. It was like so I had once I started publishing, then started getting offers to write articles for other people, and so I go, oh, this is working, so I don't know if you remember this guy. He's still around too, Gary Carter, and he had a magazine called Comic Book Marketplace, and he approached me in San Diego because I was peddling my wares, as it were, and he says, hey, I like your Harveyville Fun Times. Do you want to write for me? And I go, really? And he goes, yeah, and I'll even pay you. And I go, really? So that's how that kind of stuff.
I remember that magazine. Yeah, it was like black and white magazine.
Yeah, when I wrote it for it, it was black and white. Yeah, later it got into color too, but in the early days, I was writing in the early issues, and it was still black and white interiors. It had color covers, but yeah.
Yeah, they usually got some pretty good art for the covers.
And
if I remember correctly.
I would recycle articles out of my Harveyville Fun Times and kind of spruce them up so I didn't spend too much time. And I go, hey, this is pretty good. I didn't get paid for it when I printed it myself, but now I'm getting paid for it. So
amortizing.
Yes. So I learned the good skill of recycling things, which we're doing now with the Kickstarter. Hey, no.
Right.
Anyway.
And how'd you get involved with Bear Manor?
So. Doing all the articles, I used to bug people and say, hey, can we get this into a book? Do a book. And everybody seemed interested in a Harvey book, but nobody wanted to publish one. And again, it was a situation where it's like, oh, I should publish myself. And that's where I decided, well, if I'm going to publish myself, the easiest thing is just to recycle my own Harveyville Fun Times and just do a best of and see if I can do it. Because there is a self-publishing service called Lulu, which I think still exists, but now it's better to use like CreateSpace and other things. But
well, actually, CreateSpace doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, it doesn't? Oh, okay.
The Amazon absorbed.
Oh, okay, but I thought they still use the name. But the Amazon template.
Yeah, they're Kindle books or something now. Kindle.
All right, shows you how often I self-publish nowadays, so I'm out of the loop. But anyway, so I self-published that. That book sold well, caught the attention of Bear Manor saying, hey, why don't you write a book? And so I had recently written an article for Hogan's Alley magazine about Total Television because, there was a previous time where he was saying, what do you want to write about? And I go, I always wanted to know what happened to the company that made Underdog and Tennessee Tuxedo, because they just kind of were making cartoons in the 60s and then suddenly, poof, gone. And a lot about Jay Ward.
Did they do like Linus the Lionhearted and then all the...
No, that was a different company. That was yet another company. There's all these... I mean...
Seemed like the similar style.
Well, now that I know this, I mean, it's like after I've done the recent Chipmunks book, you obviously know UPA, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Gerald McBoing and Mr. Magoo and all that stuff.
And everybody.
Yeah. So, when that kind of ended, all these little small studios sprang up. Most of them in L.A. And one of them was called like Pantomime Pictures, and one was called I can't even think of all the names. J. Ward was one of them, and they all had their little niche, and they all did a little different thing. And so one of them did Linus, and one of them did The Alvin Show, and that was Format Films, and one of them did then there's Rocky and Bullwinkle, and then one of them did Calvin and the Colonel, and they all had that kind of similar UPA type look.
Right.
And about the only one that did.
For people that don't know, yeah, it's basically like UPA was the first animation company to streamline the animated cartoons and make them economical as opposed to like the lush Warner Brothers or Disney cartoons. So it allowed companies like Hanna-Barbera and the ones you mentioned to be able to do them cheap enough for TV and stuff.
Right. And the only one that kind of looked different stylistically, but they did the same limited animation, was like Hanna-Barbera. But that was because they had that kind of MGM background with Tom and Jerry and everything, so they just made simpler versions of Tom and Jerry by making Rough and Ready, and then later Yogi Bear and blah blah blah, Flintstones, whatever. Yeah. Where am I going with this? So anyway, Total Television was one of those, but they were based out of New York, which I didn't know as a kid.
But, me neither.
And I got the whole scoop in the story, and they're separate but equal, I guess is the way to say, with Jay Ward. I mean, they shared the same animation studio, but it was down in Mexico called Gamma. And but one was on the West Coast, that was Jay Ward, and one was on the East Coast, and that was King Leonardo. And they really didn't overlap too much, except for the animation studio and maybe a couple writers, but that's about it. And but on TV, sometimes they put Commander McBragg on a Rocky and Bullwinkle show, and then they'd sometimes put Bullwinkle's Corner on Underdog and whatever, and you'd get it all mixed up.
Fairy tales.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, between my book and this other book Keith Scott wrote about Rocky and Bullwinkle, we kind of covered all of it, so now you know who knows what and everything.
Right.
So.
And so what kind of public reaction did you have with your cracked book when it came out? Was it that did people care, or?
Yeah, I mean, they cared about Underdog. Then I did the cracked book, and it's like, the weird part about that one is by that point, internet was pretty much established kind of the way it is now. And so you could just go on Facebook and just say, hey, does anybody really care if I do a cracked book? And did you work there? Or do you know somebody who worked there? Help! And that's really what I put out there. I just put a message like that. And then, I don't know if you contacted me directly or through someone else, but I mean, it's like, that's how I met you. And then
I don't remember either, but it was probably through MySpace.
I don't know if it, because I think it might have, it was kind of the transition time of, I know I was on MySpace with the Underdog book because that was a couple years earlier, but I think
I wasn't on Facebook. I was very tardy on getting on Facebook. I don't think I got on Facebook until your book was out.
But I might have gotten you through email because I was still doing email blasts and stuff, but I don't know.
Right.
It's not that important. It's just the fact that I did attract everyone, and I even attracted some of the biggies like Dan Close and stuff like that, and some of them like him were kind of suspicious. They're saying, why are you doing a book on crack?
Yeah.
Once I explained, well, this is why. Oh, okay, all right. You want to be interviewed? Sure, I'll talk to you. It's like, and then it got easier.
Right.
You were a good interview. You got me a lot of information. I interviewed Michelina Severin because she says, oh, I remember everything. John doesn't remember anything. So it's like, and it kind of bummed me out, but at the same time, it's like, I really wanted the real story. And she said at the time, she goes, well, John could talk to you, but I remember it better, and he's busy working on a new Batlash comic.
He's like, she wants him to just sit at that table and keep working.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I obviously talked with John for, thousands of hours on the phone, but I had the excuse of, I was sending a paycheck, so she let me talk to him.
Right. And if I pushed the issue, I probably could have, but I've never been that way because I want the information, and that's the real, that's the journalist in me.
And she delivered too, right?
Yeah. And that's the journalist in me, because it's like, it's like people say, oh, you didn't talk to John Severin. Oh, aren't you upset? And I go, well, no, because I got the information I wanted to get. It's like, and it wasn't like 12th generation. It was the lady that was there the whole time.
Over her shoulder, yeah.
So.
And I think I even said this in your book, but I've always respected and envied artists that have their wives that can handle all their work for them, because it allows, frees up the artist to be creative, and the wife's like, can call the publishing company, go, where's that damn check, and weed out all the freaks calling and stuff.
Talk to her. And, the only thing looking back on it, I mean, I got some really good interviews, and some of them I'm like, whew, I'm glad I got that before they were gone. Like, of course, John and Michelina are both gone now. And I got Paul Lakin, and I thought Paul Lakin was dead already. And I even told him so, and he goes, well, no, I'm still around, but he did die a few years later, so... some I just kind of regret that I didn't do longer conversations, but, I was respectful. Like, I talked to Jack Davis, and he basically said, that he didn't like working for Cracked. He thought the pay was horrible, but, he had to do it because he was kind of between his big gigs. I mean, he wasn't at EC anymore, or Mad, and he hadn't come back to Mad, and he wasn't really doing the RCA albums or anything else, or TV Guides, so...
They wouldn't let him come back to Mad.
So he needed work, and so that's why he did Cracked, and it's like, I've mentioned this in the book.
One of the first millionaire cartoonists.
Right. So, certain way, it helped him that, he didn't, get to come back, he got to be world-renowned on Time Magazine and everything else, it's like...
Sure. But, I look at back then in the, early 60s when Davis was doing stuff for Crack, and sometimes he was doing an awful lot of pages per issue, but I also see that he was doing tons of stuff for right before Marvel, when it was after Atlas. He was doing tons of Westerns, he was doing Dell comics, and that's just it, magazine, sick, like whatever he could do. And it was like, so he's great crank. And he and Severin both were doing like 100 pages a month at least. Yeah. Which is more than a page a day of their finished, beautiful penciled and inked artwork.
I don't know how they did it, but I mean, and I always say that the I don't know which issue, I think it's 14 that has the most Davis artwork. But it's definitely issue 26 that has the most Severin. He does everything except for the subscription ad, which I think is Bill Ward, and I think the contents page or something, but he does everything else in the entire book, and he does different styles and signs it different ways. So he's a Le Pleur one on one page.
I talked to him about that. Yeah. He would say that he would do that on purpose, obviously, in different mediums, different styles, and different pen names like Le Pleur and stuff like that. So it, so it wouldn't be boring to the reader like anyone thought that.
Right.
But yeah, he could do great Bigfoot style, like animated style, or, obviously serious stuff, beautiful paintings, lush, gouache paintings in black and white, and so he would mix it up a lot. It's really great stuff. Well, this is a good segue to talk about our latest co-venture.
Okay.
We are doing a Kickstarter that is running until the first week of August. Well, this is the first week of, I guess, another 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
And it is based on Cracked.
Yes.
And it's 2 compilations of the work. One's the comedy of John Severin, which covers his first 10 years of Cracked from the 50s and 60s. And the other is the comedy of Jack Davis, which features all of Davis's art from Cracked in the 50s and 60s, which is about 100 pages and stuff. And so we've got that going on Kickstarter right now. If you look up the comedy of John Severin and Jack Davis, you'll find it. And we also have cool stuff like T-shirts and and stuff like that. Stickers. We're going to announce the stretch goal tomorrow. Stickers.
And I wrote down some statistics because that's what I do. I'm a comic book nerd. But right before the show here, presently at 3,669, we wanted at least $1,500. So we meet the goal by 244%. But we want to keep going. So yeah, we have 74 backers. Thank you very much. But how about 100? We got 6 more days. So anyway, that's my little telethon drive. Timpani, come on.
Well, I'll do my part and hype it up some more on the interwebs. And but yeah, I really enjoyed your introduction to the Severin book. It was very, very, very nice.
Well, thank you.
Informative.
Yeah.
And the Davis book has a introduction by Bob Stewart.
Bob.
Yeah.
Actually, did he just call it Bob with a silent H, or did he actually go by Bob?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
I never met the man, and I'm sad to say, but I knew about him. And,
he's a super sweetheart. He's like doing experimental films in the 60s and won awards for that. Mm-hmm. And as well as, being instrumental in comic fandom. And,
right.
And I guess Fantagraphics recently put out a 2-volume book about Wally Wood that he did.
Mm-hmm.
Really nice stuff. Wally Wood's an artist, in case people out there don't know.
And
bad artist.
I do know that Bob put the H in there because Bob Stewart's kind of a John Smith or a Mark Arnold type of name, pretty plain. Exactly. So, he put the H to be a little different, I guess.
Yeah, like Scott Shaw with an exclamation point.
Right. Because I think there was a radio DJ called Scott Shaw also. Anyway, yeah. So, is that the end of the plug, or more? What am I working on next? Oh, we're jumping ahead. Okay.
What did you say? Want to say more about the Crack Kickstarter?
Just pledge. No, do you have the URL? Yeah, can you reveal that? I mean, because I know it says tiny URL on it. I don't know the whole thing. Or you just said look up Kickstarter.
Yeah, I think you can just search it, or let me see because normally they got a short URL, and I made up one, but it's stupid to go like HTTPS.
Okay. Well, I will say this: when I'm looking it up, this will help people. If you type in, once you get to Kickstarter.com, just type Jack Davis, and it'll pull it right up. There's like one other Jack Davis Kickstarter, which is long expired, and and this is
John Severin.
Yeah, type John Severin.
Comedy or something. Actually, the actual address is www.kickstarter.com/the-comedy-art-of-John-Davis.
Or just do what I said.
Yeah, exactly.
Now
search. Actually, if you go to Kickstarter and go to the comics projects, you're able to sort them by end date. Yeah. And since there's only 5 days to go, it'll be pretty much there on the top.
Yeah. I will say this: if you're a cheapskate and you don't want to pledge, and I won't name names, I just give a big sigh. There's a couple of pretty cool videos that you edited together, including me with some outtakes that are kind of funny. Some people didn't get that. They go, why did Mort put where you're stuttering and stammering and everything? Yeah, because I told him to.
It was endearing.
Because I can't speak.
Yeah, it was like, 6 o'clock, blooper show.
Yeah.
Classic.
Because you pay attention more when it happens. You go, hey, he made a mistake. Because if I just sit there, well, this is where you buy the Jack Davis book and the John Severin book, you'll be all snore. This must be boring. I got to put something kind of lively. But, and then the other one has that lively music. I forgot where you got it, but, it's kind of like Austin Powers Light or something,
Well, yeah, I mean, that actually did remind me of Casino Royale. You mention it,
But it's the same vintage. It's all from the 60s, so why not,
Right.
So, yeah, that's the plug. I will say here, it'd be even before this one's ended, it would be cool to do another Kickstarter. I don't know when or what or how or,
Right.
Bill Ward. Do one on Bill Ward or something,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I did a Ward collection of pinups in 1990 that I shot from original art, and I'm thinking of reissuing that. And I've been talking with this guy who owns like 150 originals about maybe doing a second volume too. I had a second volume plan that was ready to go, but it just, at the time just didn't make enough money. But I had like a Russ Meyer interview, just worked with Bill. And,
that's cool.
So, yeah.
And then, people...
But I was thinking of, we could do a Ward collection for Cracked, or, might be nice to do a medley of, some of the other artists, like Portfolio, the other well-known artists there. We'll see.
Well, admittedly, there's not enough to do a book on certain ones. Like, you could do, like, a Bill Elder book, and it'd be, like, 10 pages, I think. It's like, it might be more. But, and then, but if you did Elder, Manili, whatever, it's like all the different...
Yeah, you had that idea of doing that
Jaffe,
Rad collection.
Yeah, I like your Rad collection. Redo that.
Yeah, I should probably do that, because it had all the Mad artists before they were at Mad or after they were at Mad.
Right. And then there's some people have suggested doing a Don Martin collection, but that gets into issues with... I've had dealings with his wife about it, and so far nothing has happened. But I'm going to send her copies of these books, and maybe she'll change her mind. And if she's willing to do it, I'm willing to help. So there you go. We'll leave it at that. So next question. No, just kidding.
Okay. Well, what are you working on next?
Let's see. What am I working on next? Because it's kind of weird. A few years ago, I had like 4 or 5 projects going all at once, and I was saying, I can't take on anything else. And then this Kickstarter thing happened, and I go, well, I guess I can, but this is a little bit different animal. But for the longest time, I was working on these 4 projects. It was a book on the Alvin Show and Alvin and the Chipmunks, which finally came out earlier this year. The last book before that is a...
What's that title?
Yeah, it's called Alvin!
Oh! Did you actually talk to the Baghdad Gasserians?
I tried. I wrote letters. I sent emails. I talked to their secretary on the phone. No response. So I said, I'm doing my book anyway. And it's like, if they come out a-suing, I said, well, let's see what we can work out. I'll interview you now. Hey, let's make a new book. That's better. I don't know. But so far, crossing fingers, knock on wood, everything else, they've left me alone. My book has been doing well, and it's it's a labor of love. It's a tribute. I don't say anything bad about them. I do know. I'll say something a little bit off color here. Is like, they've been very litigious in the past. And they're very protective about those properties. I get it. But at the same time, a book needed to come out, and Ross Jr. promised one 20 years ago, and it's still not out.
My family did pretty well for a novelty hit song.
And
such a media powerhouse.
They've known.
It happened with Purple People either.
And they've known how to reinvent it 10 times. I mean, there's many people that are like, oh, the Alvin Show version is the only good version, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but, I mean, you have to go and update things sometimes. I get it,
Sure.
And for the purists out there who don't like the later incarnations, don't buy the records, don't see the movies, don't...
Did you cover those CGI movies?
I did, but in one chapter, I just covered everything because it was really about Ross Sr. and his musical career. I talk about Liberty Records, I talk about Format Films, so I cover that. So it really kind of ends with the death of Ross Sr., and then it just kind of one more chapter saying what happened next. But I kind of did that on the Crack book too. I do it on all of them. I mean, it's like the Crack books were about the magazine. They weren't about the website. And so I kind of put a little page in the back. Yeah, now it's a website. Big deal. It's like I didn't really want to acknowledge that because it wasn't really what I was talking about. It's just something with the name Crack slapped on it. That's how I feel about it. And it's kind of nice, I guess, that they keep the name out there. But with these, they have their own podcasts and stuff like that. But it just kind of like, when you know they're not talking about the magazines and never will.
No, and they totally disown the fact that they were ever a magazine.
Yeah.
Did comics.
So, I don't get it. But anyway, back to your question. What am I working on? So I have, I did a Monkeys book, which it's called Long Title, and it really does have a long title. So I just call it the Monkeys book with long title in the front. My co-author.
Do you actually examine the monkey songs?
I do, one by one.
Title promises?
With a co-author person named Michael A. Ventrella. He's a very good guy. He lives in.
But what does Randy Scouse Scat really mean?
It is Liverpudlian slang for basically a stupid,
I know what Randy
stupid fucking dick. Okay, I'll be blunt. And over here, it was like it just came out as Randy Scouse Git. Over there, they go, you can't call it that, and so they called it alternate title, which was really bizarre. So, but hey,
those Brits can't take a joke.
But that book was wildly successful. I hate to say it had a second life when certain Mr. Torque passed away earlier this year. Cry, cry, cry.
Yeah.
And so anyway,
Did you have any involvement from the existing Monkeys at the time with the book?
Either time, just peripherally, meaning we have both met. I've met all four of them on separate occasions and seen the various combinations of three at various occasions, and two even in recent times. And then Michael has seen probably the same amount, just in different configurations over the years, but we've never really, and we've tried to get like a sit-down interview and stuff like that. So,
any insight from Boyce and Hart in it?
Didn't get them, but the cool thing about the original book is we did interview other people that were either fans of the Monkees or worked with them or something like that. So, like Howard Kalin of the Turtles does the foreword in that book, and Peter Noon of Herman's Hermits, he did an interview with me.
Great.
I interviewed Butch Patrick, who was in a Monkees episode, and he was Eddie Munster. I said it Herman, but I meant Eddie. And a few other people. I got David Peel before he passed away, street musician in New York, the new John Lennon.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And
see him all the time in Tompkins Square Park.
Yeah. And we got quite a few people like that. I got the guy who did instrumental music for the Monkees show. His name escapes me off the top of my head. Oops, sorry. But, and so there's little tidbits besides just two wankers sitting there crabbing about how good Daydream Believer is or isn't. So, because some people criticize it. They go, "Oh, what qualifies them to say anything about the Monkees?" Well, I don't know what qualifies any critic to be a critic. I mean, it's like if I need qualifications, I know how to write music. I've played piano for 10 years, and I did get a music theory history, and I'm just a big fan of music and TV and pop culture in general. I don't know if that qualifies me or not. I didn't get a degree in it, but it's like. And
do you remember the Monkees parody we did at Crack?
Yes, I did. I loved that at the time because I was already a Monkees fan. I became a Monkees fan, and it says so in the book, in the 80s. And it was before they came back. I didn't think they would come back. I just suddenly became a fan because I said, wow, this music's pretty good. Because as a kid, and people always cringe when I say this, I hated the TV show. I thought it was horrible.
Really?
And I was watching it on Saturday morning reruns, and I think a lot of it had to do is I liked cartoons better than live action shows in general. And so you'd be watching, and it'd be like all these great cartoons, and then you get to like 11 o'clock or noon or whatever, and they switch to the Monkees, and I go, who are these guys? And
cartoons are over.
And my impression, and I was a kid, and I was just like, they think they're so funny, it's like they're not.
What's your opinion of Head?
Oh, I love that movie, and in fact, that was what that is what turned me around on liking because the order of it was this: is like, so I didn't like the show, so I didn't care for them. I liked the theme song, but that was about it. And then I started noticing Michael Nesmith because he started putting out some interesting albums. And I said, okay, so he has some talent, but it wasn't in the Monkees. It was one of these separate. These are my unsolicited, uninformed opinions, you know. And then he did elephant parts, and I thought that was like the funniest thing in the world. And I said, this is a zillion times funnier than anything on the Monkees. So he's the brains of the outfit. The rest of them, you know. And then he did television parts and da 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 da, and you know. So I was a big Nesmith fan.
He was a very early video music innovator as well back in the day. Yeah.
But you know, I was at some bookstore one day, and they had more of the Monkees in the quarter bin, you know, of a record at the record store or whatever. And so I said, I'll take a risk for a quarter, you know. And I started playing it, and some of the songs, like I'm a Believer, I knew, and I say, oh, that's pretty good. And then other songs, like She and stuff like that, I don't think I'd heard before, but I said, this is really good, you know. And it's like, okay, I want more of this stuff. So I became a fan of the music. But I said, that stupid TV show, I can't watch that. And then Head came out on video sometime in the late 80s. But I'd already seen the Monkees in concert by that point. And then I saw the movie and I said, wow, this is great.
Pretty deep. Yeah.
And so then I said, well, let me look at those TV shows again. And I didn't cringe as much, but I still was like, I like the movie better. But now, since when I did the book, I actually rewatched all the TV shows in order. And I realized that had the TV show continued for a third season, it probably would have ended up like Head anyway. Because if you...
I don't know if Jack Nicholson would have worked on this.
But if you watch the last few episodes of the second season, they're heading that direction. Yeah. They're going that direction.
Yeah, they were getting to a point where it was totally like, you know, we're going to do whatever we want.
Yeah, because the first season is almost standard sitcom. I mean, they have little visual gags and, you know, other stuff, but it's very formal. It's like the landlord's wanting the rent. They have the little
Russian spy.
They have the little dummy sitting there saying some things, or Rosemary will come by and say something. You know, it's like, but it's very streamlined and formal, and this is how you do it. By the second season, then they started doing the bit where, you know, even on the opening titles, where they confuse the names around. You know, they all think they're Peter, and then finally Peter gets his due at the end.
And he's happy.
Yes. And I go, wow, that's brilliant, you know, because it's like if you don't know these people, it's like, what the fuck are their names? Who is this? You know, and they didn't care. And I don't know if the laugh track went away, but they did, like, episodes near the end, like the fairy tale one, and the very last episode, which is Mija Kojio, or however you pronounce it, where Mickey directed it about a TV that hypnotizes people. You know, you know, it's like, these are really bizarre concepts, and they're like straight out of what would have become Head had they made a longer episode that was not just 30 minutes or whatever, you know.
Right.
Because, you know, there's scenes in Head that you could say, oh, that could have been on, like the scene with Davy and Tony Basil dancing around. That could have been on a TV show. It's still more fanciful than what they did on the TV show most of the time, but it's pretty straightforward Monkees type thing. But you know, as part of the movie, it's excellent because the songs in there are probably the best they ever did.
Yeah, that one with Tony Basil is a really good song too about his dad.
And that's by one of my favorite artists of all time, Harry Nilsson. So we have to give him credit.
Oh, right,
yeah. And I saw Head last November in person in the theater at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood. And Mickey and Mike showed up. Peter hadn't passed away yet, but, you know, it's like he was not there. And Mickey and Mike had just had an open heart surgery, and he was in excellent spirits. And I think you can see it on YouTube if you look it up. So and Mickey was a little bit tipsy, but it worked. You know? Or at least he sounded that way. He might not have had a drink. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But he sounded like he had imbibed for a little bit, you know. Cause,
he had quite the career too, Mickey, from
so that
boy on.
That long-winded answer is the Monkees book did well. So we were asked by Bear Manor to do a sequel. And it's like, how do you do a sequel on this? And it's like, well, you cover their solo careers. And so we are, and we did. And it's like, at first it was like, how is this working? And so it's almost done. It might come out this year, probably come out next year. Scott Shaw's doing a cover again, and yeah, and we're still like doing the final touches of getting like quotes from other people and forwards and all that other good stuff.
So you must be covering that if you're doing the solo stuff. There, the stuff Davey did with Voice and Heart. And was it Dolan's and
Dolan's, Jones, Voice and Heart, which we do cover in the first book too, because it kind of is a Monkees reunion, kind of, but
because the guys behind the curtain plus the real monkey,
right?
The real Monkees,
and we didn't know at the time we were going to do this sequel book. So at the time we said, well, if we're going to cover it, we should cover it here because that's kind of a reunion. Even because they even called it the Golden Hits the Monkees, even though it was a Dolan's Jones, Voice and Heart tour, which is really kind of weird, but they knew where their bread was buttered, so they had to put the Monkees name on there somewhere. So but yeah, I cover all the obscure solo releases and stuff like that, and cover other things that they've done. Like Mickey had a great directing career for a number of years in England, and he did a lot of voiceovers for Hanna-Barbera in the 70s. We even talk about Circus Boy.
Pebbles and Bam Bam.
That was one he didn't do. He was in Funky Phantom, and he was in Devlin, and he was in what was this? Captain Caveman, of all things. And
did you bring up the fact he was almost the Fonz?
Yes. And
that would have changed world history.
I had to go through all the Monkees stuff I had and scour the internet and everything like that to find like little bits and pieces. Fortunately, I was a longtime subscriber to Monkey Business Fanzine, and they had the most. It was like TMI minutia, It's like, it's like, Davy Jones took a piss today when he rode his horse. It's like, okay, I guess so. It's like he broke his collarbone looking at, whatever, and it's like, okay, but it's kind of interesting when you look at it the way I did. It's like, over the years they said never again, like Davy Jones said, never again in 1991 will I work with Mickey Dolenz ever again, and then 5 years later they're touring again, and they say I have these aspirations to do this, that, and the other, and then the Monkees are calling again. Okay, I'm dropping all those plans and doing the Monkees again, and I'm
pretty sure he won't be doing it anymore.
Right. But it's like, and then Nesmith was like, I don't want to be around the rest of them. I'm rich. I got liquid paper money. Yeah. But now he doesn't mind touring. It's like, okay, Well,
it's sort of like Adam West or Ginger on Gilligan's Island, where it's like I am never going to be associated with that again. But then they get a little older and they're cool about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They realize that they made a difference.
Yes. But it's always kind of too late sometimes. It's like, I know Nesmith got some flack because, I think I'll tour now with the Monkees, 6 months after Davey passed away. And it's like,
Where were you?
Yeah, it's like, where were you the last 15 years? You could have toured with him or whatever,
Okay.
But
do you also cover that classic recreation of the Monkees, the TV series they did in the 80s?
Oh, the new Monkees?
Yeah.
I mentioned it, but I mean, actually, that's going to start happening. It's like, since there's only two original Monkees left, there's going to be new Monkees reunion tour, and they'll start putting out more records than they did in the 80s. I don't know.
The Monkees, the next generation. Well, yeah, that was our excuse to do a Monkees parody of Crack, just because of that crummy new TV show. Because I do parodies of old TV shows, but I couldn't really get away with doing a Monkees parody, except they had that stupid new show. So I was like, perfect.
Although, I guess it wasn't Crack, but they started doing it at Mad. They started parodying older things. Even in the most current issue, they finally did a parody of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So
the Gene Wilder one?
Yes. Yeah. And what they do is they parallel it with Trump, because they always have to do Trump and everything.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's actually kind of interesting if you get the new issue. But let me ask you this. I'm turning the tables. What is your opinion of MAD? What do you think that they should do, or is it over, or do you think they're fooling?
Yeah, well,
or
I was going to ask you that as well. But
okay. I can get my opinion.
Yeah, I mean,
too.
print's tough. Okay, print is dead.
Yeah.
And, people have asked me before, like, would you want to do a new humor magazine, like Crack Mad? And I'm like, not really. Like, what I would prefer doing is doing the format in short animated videos.
Yeah.
Getting people to do the likenesses, animate them, getting voice actors, because that's the only way people are going to watch them,
Yeah. Well, to answer your question in reverse, since I asked it, yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like MAD for the last 30 years has been kind of just like stillborn in a certain respect. It's like I always say that MAD really wasn't MAD after Feldstein retired, but some people, they go all the way to when Gaines passed away in 92. So fine, 85 to 92 or whatever.
I go all the way earlier from when I was working at Crack. I thought they were pretty dead.
So which has
been a little biased.
Yeah, because already you got your Ficarra in there who came from Cracked, even though he doesn't want to admit it. But so Feldstein at least was like a link to the beginning, and it's I guess Nick Meglin was there at the beginning too, but he wasn't an editor, he was like office boy or something. So I mean, Feldstein was an editor from the beginning, and that's what I'm kind of going on. And it's like when he retired in 84 or 85, whenever he did, and ironically Sproul retired from Cracked at the same time. It was kind of an end of an era, right at the same time. I didn't know that, but it's funny. Feldstein said in an interview, he says, we need to do something with this. We need to expand into movies and TV and do other things. And Gaines really didn't want to do anything. Of course, then they did that awful Up the Academy movie, and then that kind of killed everything,
Sure.
And then I think things like Mad TV and the Mad Cartoon Show came way later after Gaines was gone, but it's kind of like almost too little too late. And Mad and even Cracked. Well, not Cracked. Cracked actually held its own. But Mad over the years is just increasingly just geared itself to a younger and younger audience. I mean, that's what I never got. It's like when I was a kid, they do parodies of Death Wish, R-rated movies, Godfather, and
Clockwork Orange.
And it's like, well, I don't know if I'll see that movie anytime soon, but I'll read the parody, and then someday I might see the movie. And now it's like every issue is, let's parody Aquaman. Oh, let's parody Avengers. Let's parody this other superhero movie. And it's like, first of all, they're parodies already of what a movie is, and it's like, they don't do like parodies of like Hidden Figures or The Imitation Game or something like that. It's like, why not? It's like,
I've always felt since probably 80s, maybe even earlier, they wrote down to their audience, whereas that was the appeal when I was a little kid, is they didn't write down to you. And if there was something you didn't understand, you found out about it years later. Sometimes you'd be like, "Oh, that's what that was about." And that's what I did with Crack as well. Is I didn't want to write down to kids because they're a lot smarter than you think.
Yeah. And so it's been kind of a downward.
Maybe not anymore, but.
Well, yeah, until the millennials came along. Whoops, and I'm just kidding. Wah, wah, wah. Anyway.
Damn kids.
But, I don't know. I have two minds about it. I mean, of course I want Mad to continue. I want Crack to continue, but it's just all nostalgia. In reality, I think, well, it hasn't really been that good for the last 30 years. Yeah. Nobody really remembers that it's out, It's like now that, it's kind of funny, now that Mad's kind of changing whatever they're doing. I don't know if they're completely going away or going reprint only. I don't know, but let's say they're going reprint only, okay, except for a cover. So that pretty much kills it, so nobody can buy it, so it just helps to kill it more. And so people are coming out of the...
It's good to keep the classic material in print.
Yeah, but I mean, people are coming out of the woodwork and now wanting to subscribe to it, and they're wanting to subscribe to Cracked, not even knowing that that's been gone for over a decade, you know. And it's like, and it's like, where are you guys? And it's like when Mad goes away, it's like they go, oh, you know. There's this big outpouring of emotion, like, oh, Matt's going away. It's like, well, where were you? Why weren't you buying it? Oh, it's too expensive. You know, I want it to be 35 cents still. It's like, well, a gallon of milk used to be 35 cents. It ain't either. You know, it's like everything's gone up as your wages. Buy a $5.99 Mad, or if you're a cheapskate, get a subscription. You can still get it for like $1 an issue, but, you know. It also cracks me up when people say, oh, well, you know, Mad, I remember when it wasn't so liberal-leaning. And it's like, when was that?
Yeah, exactly.
You got conservative, buddy. You know.
It's like, oh, man, those Nixon gags.
Yeah, I know. It's like, oh, they never made fun of a president like Trump before. I remember some really harsh stuff against Nixon and Reagan and Clinton and Obama. You know, it's like...
Yeah. Jimmy Carter, they all got it.
Yeah. Oh, well.
I don't know. They didn't lean on Kennedy much.
Well, yeah, they did. Actually, my friend Lee, who's a sponsor of Lee's Comics, he was telling me this. It's like, they kind of secretly thought that Nixon was going to win, because if you look at that issue, and he's correct about this, sure, yeah. The actual real cover that has the indicia and everything or whatever, because both sides of the front side, the actual real cover is the Nixon side. Because I think they just assumed he'd win, you know, because Eisenhower's in there, everything's great.
Until that televised debate they had there, where it's all sweaty and everything.
Yeah. And I think the debate probably happened while that issue was going to print, so they, you know, they're gonna go. And also, it's a flip cover, so it really doesn't matter which one's real. But it's just funny that the real cover actually was the Nixon cover, you know.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, I was reading an amusing Kennedy parody in Cracked. That was there was pretty mocking of him being, you know, rich Massachusetts kid and everything. And I looked at the cover date, and it would have been out like right after he died, you know. So it's like, that diamond cracked.
Well, I do talk about that. I talk about the articles that were published posthumously, and then the funniest one is where they take Kennedy and they kind of put a goatee on and glasses to make him kind of a beatnik, and it's like, oh, come on, you know. It's like,
that was a Ward one, right?
Yes, you know.
Yeah.
So
that's funny.
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe, you know, with the death of Mad, this is a good time for books to come out.
Yeah.
There's a clamor for classic
books seem to still work. I mean, I think it's because they have a longer shelf life, and so it gives you time to promote. But, you know, the weird thing about magazines is like, I go, how come there's like 12 needlepoint magazines? You know, you go into the magazine stores that still exist, and it's like, you'll see like crocheting and, you know, books about like every subject. And there's like 20 music magazines, and it's like, there's no humor magazines except maybe cartoons. That's really about the only thing. And
that's kind of sparse.
Yeah, and that wasn't really funny back in the day, and still it's not very funny. It's just kind of cutesy-poo cartoons with cars in them. And this other guy does this magazine called The Creeps, which is a total rip on Creepy, but he does it well, and I guess they've done at least 20 issues, so I guess it sells, but it's like, why do those sell and Mad can't, or Crack can't, or Crazy can't? Although I did hear Marvel's going to put out a new issue of Crazy. I don't know if it's going to be any good, but, you know.
Well, it looks like it's going to be like superhero humor as opposed to,
And they're supposed to put out their own best of, which I'm looking forward to more.
I'm sorry, they're what?
They're putting out a best of the old Crazy, so it's like, I'm looking forward to that more.
God bless them.
Yeah, because that has like
it's like the best of Paul Lakin.
But, you know, they might be too squeamish to put Casper the Dead Baby. It's like, please put it in there. Please. Anyway, times change. Anyway, still answering the question. So I have a Warren Kremer book. Who, if you don't know,
great, excellent.
Okay, you know who Warren Kremer is. Most people don't.
You covering his horror stuff too?
Yes, everything. His pulp stuff. So his Casper and Richie Rich stuff, of course.
I've recolored a bunch of his horror covers.
Yeah, I've seen that. So I'm like, cool. Yeah. But I have complete cooperation with the family, which was
great.
Like with Norma Martin, kind of a blessing and a curse, if you know what I mean. Because they want it perfect, and I get it. It's their dad, and I go, okay. But it makes for long lead times because they gotta look over everything.
Go back and
forth. Yeah.
So are you doing? Is there going to be any color in the book?
Trying. I can't guarantee it, but most of the stuff's in black and white.
There's a lot of color cover sketches of his, like.
That's true. That's true. Covers, yeah, but a lot of the original artwork's in black and white too. So.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, there's there's just like these really nice color pencil sketches of the covers before he did them and stuff that are really nice that are out there in high res.
Yes, and they are in the book, but I think so far they're in black and white. But I can try, That one's with a different publisher, so there might be a little more flexibility. Mm-hmm. So, because. I caught with my Disney book. Here's a positive thing in the Disney book. With my Disney book, I caught the eye of the guy who publishes Theme Park Press, who does a bunch of Disney books. And he asked me if I had another Disney book idea, and I really didn't for now. I mean, I might change my mind in the future, but I said, well, I want to do this Warren Kremer book, and I typically would send it over to Bear Manor like everything else, but I can give you first crack at it. And he says, okay. So he has developed another line called Pulp Hero Press, I believe is what the name of it is. And so it's coming out under that. And it has been turned in, but I have not seen the proofs back or anything. So it's.
And did you have any dealings with the Harvey family about it?
Not for that book, because there is still a rift that will probably never be resolved about, and it's all about who created Richie Rich. And the Harvey family, admittedly, will not like this book because it gives Warren Kremer full credit because it's with cooperation with the Kremer family. The one that's more open-ended is my Harvey Comics Companion, which came out about 3 years ago, and I purposely left it ambiguous, giving everyone their fair say, saying I created Richie, no I created, it's like everybody created Richie Rich, it's like, but it's like I would love to interview them, but there's always like this conflict of interest. Oh, I can't do this and that and the other. I don't want to go into too much detail about that, but it's like so I'm doing my book, and it's like it's not their book. If they want to do their version of the book, I'd be happy to help them, or they can issue their own. That's how I see it. Mm-hmm. Then the fourth book, which is still kind of in writing, and I'm working with Victoria Biggers, who's the daughter of Buck Biggers, a total television scrapbook. And it's kind of an updating of the old book, but I decided to do a completely different book because originally I was just going to update the old one because it's 10 years old. And then I said, well, why do that? Just do a different book. So I'm doing a different book. And it has like one page because there's a few errors, as in all my books. There's errors here and there. But it just corrects a couple of the errors that were in the other book. But in general, it's all brand new stuff. Because it's a scrapbook.
Well, by virtue of the title, it have a lot more artwork.
It has a lot more artwork. I got a lot of, and this is courtesy of Heritage Auctions, but I think they put it up there on purpose for people to use. Underdog artwork that was for the Gold Key Comics and Charlton Comics and things like that. I'm in contact with this other guy, and forgive me, I'm not thinking of his name. Oh, Bill Smith. Yeah, and he's worked with the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade and other balloons for years. For years, yes. And he has all the inside scoop. He wrote some material for the book, gave me some really good behind-the-scenes pictures of the underdog balloon and all the information about it and everything like that. And just a wealth of information that wasn't in the other book. The other book just kind of said, yeah, there's an underdog balloon, and here's a picture of it. It's like, so. And the daughter, Victoria Biggers, she found a scrapbook after Buck Biggers passed away that had all this stuff that he didn't cover when I talked to him and interviewed him because, it's like we just didn't. And so, there's lots of artwork in that, and so she's scanning all that, and so, yeah, it's
fantastic.
So it's a bit picture heavy more than text heavy, but that's designed to be that way.
It's a visual thing, eh?
Yeah, I did do one interview because there's one guy. This is an error I made, named Harvey Siegel. In the original book, I claimed he was dead. And, well, it was a situation like Paul Lincoln. I thought he was dead, and it's like I found out, nope, he was alive. I'm not sure if he's alive now. I'm not sure if he's alive now because I interviewed him 5 years ago, but got the interview down. He gave me a great insight of working in Gamma in Mexico City. And so that interview is going to be published for the first time in this book. And corrects a lot of information that was incorrect in, I hate to say, Keith Scott's Rocky and Bullwinkle show and Daryl Van Sitter's Jay Ward book, but, hey, he was there and they didn't interview him, so it's like, but it could be a situation, to be honest, to be fair to them, like everything else, like the Richie Rich thing, it's a he said, she said, but at least this is his take on it. It's like, it wasn't, such a bad place to work, and falling apart and everything like the other books imply, but hey, But you could say, you could have two people's opinions about Cracked magazine, and I think we talked about it without naming names, too. Your opinion of Cracked was much different than, say, another person's opinion of Cracked, that was working at the same time. So, there you go. It's just perception on everything, so.
Sure.
And I think that's everything, and then I plan to take a nap, I think, after that. So.
Well, it's a well-earned nap.
Oh, I'm doing these podcasts, too, and I'm losing my voice doing one, so, anyway.
Yeah.
But,
all right, well, I don't know how long your podcasts usually go, but we've got a full hour and 20 minutes worth, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Let me get a sip of water here, and then I can talk a little bit longer. I didn't know I was doing all the talking. Anyway, so that's pretty much it for me, what I'm doing now. I for future, I'd like to continue doing the podcast for a while. It's kind of an interesting idea.
Well, you got your second season. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
That's pretty cool.
And I like you.
And I gotta mention too.
Yes.
I noticed your snazzy new logo for that podcast.
Oh yeah. I wonder who designed that. Who designed that? Because I had this crummy old new agey light bulb logo that I'd used for years, and my friend Lee of Lee's Comics, another plug in the show, said you need to update that logo. And it's like, why? I like that logo. And he says, no, you need to update it. I go, fine, I'll do it for the second season. So he came up with some designs, and then I handed them off to you. And yes, you designed something really fantastical. It almost reminded me, and I didn't tell you this, it almost reminds me of like some R. Crumb kind of design thing or something.
Yeah, what did they have, like Apex Prep?
Yeah, that type of deal, with the little rays of light coming out of it. I don't know. It's kind of
gasp or something. Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but maybe that was in the back of my head.
And so I passed it by to Lee and to my girlfriend, and they both gave it the big thumbs up, and so that's what, so.
I was thinking of putting a crack in the light bulb.
No, it's not cracked. Maybe on, we're not putting it on the book, but if we did put it on the book, you put a little crack on it. But anyway.
Hey, actually, it's not too late. I can put the logo in.
You can put the logo on there,
Yeah.
But you could put a little crack on that one. But, I like you, you go, like, magazine editing, I mean, you and I both did it. I did a fanzine, you did Cracked, it's like, It's kind of like been there, done that, and it's like I want to do something because I got a degree in broadcasting, and I really wanted to make films and videos and cartoons and all sorts of things in my life, and it's like since print is almost dead, and I did work in the real newspaper industry. I worked for the San Francisco Chronicle, and I worked for a number of other newspapers and magazines and stuff. It's like, trying to move into the audio and maybe video later. I did a little video clip for the promotion on the Kickstarter. I'd like to do more of those type of things. It's just time and editing. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so we'll see, but that's where I'm at. So
great.
So
why don't we wrap it up? And before we go, we should mention again that this episode was brought to you by Lee's Comics.
Yes, and I didn't tell you to say this, but I was going to say this on the end of the show. I have some music that was actually on an episode of last season with my good friend Andrew Goldfarb, who is the Slow Poisoner. He tours around the country, and he writes little nifty songs, so I asked him, can I use some of your songs as a theme song so it's a little more upbeat and I have something to open and close the show with? So I'm using a couple of his songs for this season, and I don't have the titles in front of me, so I'll have to give title mention in the next episode, but I'm giving Andrew Goldfarb at least credit for coming up with these wonderful tunes. So
nice. Can't wait to hear them.
All right. And I guess that's about it.
All right, well, let's remind people about that Kickstarter, because it's only a couple more days.
Yes.
And do you have a website?
I do, which I'm desperately trying. I might talk to you offline about this. I'm desperately trying to update, because it's a little...
I do that stuff.
Yes, it's funideas.50webs.com. And 50 is 50, so it's one of those freebie sites. And then I have harveycomics.50webs.com. But you can find me on such interesting places as Wikipedia, IMDb, Facebook, and even on Amazon. I have an author page on there. So.
Oh, great.
So.
Yeah, we should probably mention too. There is a really good crack fan page on Facebook. It's pretty fun, and it's got a few of the editors and publishers on there that comment regularly, and a lot of cool art's posted.
Yes, and I got suckered into publishing all the specials and annuals covers during this calendar year, and I will be happy when it's 2020 and I am done. There is actually, even though
you only have the collector's editions, you can still get a lot of other titles, or Monster Party.
Right. I had an argument that there's not enough to go this whole year, and it's like, no, there's enough to go this whole year. And we're in Monster Party. We're almost done, and then the next will be, I can preview it here, Party Pack and Spaced Out, and all those wonderful ones. So they're coming up.
Super.
Yeah, super eventually, yeah.
Did you already do Giant?
Haven't done Giant yet, because I'm doing all the ones that start with Cracked in the title. So we're in Cracked Monster Party. They are alphabetical.
Gotcha.
So at the end it'll be Extra Special Cracked and Giant Cracked and King Size Cracked and Filter Tip Cracked and whatever. I don't know. All these goofy titles.
All right, well, it's been great talking with you, and I hope you didn't mind putting yourself in the role of the interviewee.
No, I've done it before on other podcasts, just not my own, but that's okay.
Right.
This is all free form.
Interesting.
Yes. Well, thank you very much.
You've had a fun career, and it sure ain't over yet.
Hopefully not, yeah. And same with you. I enjoy your Neo-Charlton titles and everything else you do, and I hope you keep doing all those type of things in the future.
Oh yeah, people can actually, that's a good segue again, is
you can plug your
people can check out all my stuff at simply morttodd.com.
Alright, sounds good. Okay,
alrighty, well, great talking with you.
Great talking with you, and until next time, this is the Fun Ideas Podcast, and see you next week. Thank you for listening, and thank you again, Mort Todd, for being my host, and I, the special guest. Episode number 38 will be coming soon. If you would like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. You can become a Patreon of Fun Ideas Productions, and if everyone listening just contributed $1 a month, it would be a tremendous help. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. This has been the Fun Ideas Podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2019 Fun Ideas Productions, and thank you very much, and have a good night.
Lace to rhinestone kisses on those blind eyelids and drive with your velour chauffeur across the river Styx. Popping creation pills in the pink electric church. The final flicker of your lewd jewel